out, and then I'm going live stream. Just so you know, we're going on Facebook today. Is that
The
okay with you?
producer shouldn't be like giving this background. We're supposed to start with a bang, like excitement, Tony. I've got to teach you how to do this.
Well, I've tried. You've tried to teach me. Look how far you've gotten.
Looks like you're in bed. Anyway, okay, ready? So, Professor Williams, or Tony Williams,
Hi.
from the prestigious Bill of Rights Institute, we are so happy to have you today.
Well, thanks. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks. But
Uh,
first, we got to pay due homage to our, we named the show after him, Tootle Talk. So we're going to get to you in a second. Professor Tootle, welcome.
Nice to be here as well in my house.
Yeah, yeah. How you doing today?
I'm great.
Nothing's in the news this morning or this week again, right?
Yeah, might have something. Might have some Bill of Rights issues. Yeah.
Is there anything that we have to talk about before, or should we just skip the current events of the last week?
Well, if anybody hasn't been paying attention, the FBI raided the home of John Bolton.
So that's interesting. We've had a former president be raided. Now we have the former national security or advisor be raided. I think we'll all get raided soon. I know I'm not supposed to say that kind of stuff, but is that okay, or are we okay with it? Probably, right? We don't know yet.
Well, we don't know yet, but I suspect this is something bad. But I was actually just texting or emailing with my good friend George Nash because President Trump has already got it out there that he didn't order this.
Did not order it.
Yeah, that he didn't know about it beforehand. And
well, that's good for the trial.
So that alone makes me think that, well, I mean, it's bad, and it who knows what could happen because of this, but it's probably not going to take down the Trump administration.
Well, I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
At least with this instance. Okay, so is there any other news we need to talk about, Professor? We have a contemporary show on politics and public policy and how history relates to current events. Is there anything that any of our live viewers or viewers that watch in a couple hours need to know, or should we just skip it for this week because of the prestige of Mr. Williams?
I think we should defer to the genius that is Tony Williams.
I love that. Okay, cool. We're going to go to you. So, Tony, you work for an organization that I'm pretty confident is a 501c3. It's nonpartisan. It's bipartisan. It's a not-for-profit nonprofit. You don't want to talk President Trump or the former president or any other. Well, actually, you probably do want to talk presidents, but you don't want to get involved in any partisan conversation at all, do you?
well, that's not true. That's not true, but only in the sense that what I like to do, even personally, what I do as a senior fellow at BRI, what the Bill of Rights Institute does, is we like to take these headlines out of the news. We like to take these partisan politics and look at them, like you and Stephen and the other members do, through a constitutional lens. And so we're not afraid to discuss current events and that kind of thing. But I do like to put things in historical perspective, like to take a constitutional lens, like to take some of that outrage out there and filter it and to make it more deliberative.
Gosh, I completely love that. Well, you're going to fit right into our show. So, a personal privilege. This has been on my wall for 25 years since I first got elected. My wife gave it as a gift to me, and it has a 4-panel, much larger one of the Constitution. When I was looking through your web, and we're going to get back to you in a second, Professor, I just am so pleased to have him. If you ever open up a Western Colorado or Western Rocky Mountain region branch of the Bill of Rights Institute, I want to be your contract employee. I'm not a very good employee. That's why I say contract employee. So I am just thrilled to have you. Professor Tootle, thank you so much for getting him here for us.
Well, and I mean, Tony's a friend of mine, and I love him very much. I think he's a fantastic human being. I think that, in my Mount Rushmore of great Americans who are doing things to make the world a better place, he's up there in the top half dozen. I mean,
wait, now remember our next two.
If we're doing show and tell to impress Tony, let's show him. This is my food pantry, right? Look at what I keep, the Bill of Rights Institute.
Ooh. The man wants to know about founding principles and civic virtues when he reaches for a protein bar. I love it.
This is how close I have to have it with me at all times. It stays up here, right? Just anytime you want to microwave some food, you better learn about natural rights. You know.
You
So
are awesome.
Professor Williams, he has pulled that out. This is our 129th show, I think, and he has opened his pantry not to show us his carbs, but his pantry at least 5 times to show that. So you have been speaking to us informally without your face and name for years now. So thank you for that. So for new listeners or people that want to know who the heck we're talking to, just a one or two top line stuff about Tony. He's senior fellow of the Bill of Rights Institute. He's worked there for more than 10 years. He is the author of 6 books. And we're Facebook friends now, are you writing a new book? So will this be the 7th book?
It will be. Yes.
Is
Yeah.
it a secret what the title is?
I'll just say generally that it's a book on the Declaration of Independence. My
Love it.
agent is interested in and gonna help hopefully sell to a big New York publisher. So we'll see.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. Well, one of your major books, Washington and Hamilton, The Alliance That Forged America, hundreds of essays online for a variety of institutions and universities, taught at the high school level, college level, guest professor, hundreds of groups around the country. Revolutionary War Sites is kind of cool, including the prestigious College of the Sequoias. I love that. He's spearheading a number of initiatives for America 2020, America 250. If you'll bring that up at some point in the conversation, I want to know, because I think we should focus that on for a whole year. We should talk about that. Your wife Lynn and 2 grown children. I have 2 grown children as well. Lives in Williamsburg, Virginia. Professor Tootle. That's kind of his structure. Any color commentation on that, or also a personal introduction to Tony?
Well, I would just say that you know, one of the things I used his book on Washington and Hamilton for years, and students loved it. This is a person who is dedicated to bringing who makes complicated ideas easier to understand, and so that's why I've always really identified with him. And then the other thing is he's a great lover of books, and we share. Often a similar taste in reading material. And then he's just a high character, wonderful human being. It's important that people know that not every elite institution in America is headed by a moral monster. He's a genuinely good-hearted, wonderful person who anybody would benefit from his friendship. So I just think the world of him. I don't I you I can't think of uh, I can't think of a bad thing I would ever say about Tony Williams.
Well,
Uh,
gosh, you're in good company, because our next 2 speakers, Tony, are Professor Stephen Knott, who you either know or know of.
co-authored a book with.
Yep.
Co-author. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. And then our next one after that is Professor Tom Brusino of the Army War College, who you either know or know of.
Yeah.
So you're in good company with Professor Tootle. Thanks for being his friend.
A lot of good guys. No, he is a tremendous fellow. We had a great time out in California, and we were fixing flat tires and
Yes,
going out for Mexican food and looking at the sequoias. It was awesome.
Yeah, if you think that it's too fancy, we have the photos to prove that we are not fancy when we are pulled over by the roadside and have the tire off the car, and yeah,
love it.
you really find somebody's characters when you're pulling a nail out on the roadside.
I love that. Professor Tootle, you get the second question. I get the first. And then you get the third, fourth, and fifth as well. So get ready. Professor Tony Williams, I was somewhat surprised by the name of the Bill of Rights Institute after I looked at your website, because it's not just the Bill of Rights. It's the Declaration of Independence. It's the Constitution. It's our philosophical structures behind our government, checks and balances, and rule of law and federalism. So it seems to be much broader than the Bill of Rights. Can you just talk to me a little bit about that? It's a fairly new institution, 1999, so 26 years old. Can you just give a structure of you and why you love it, why you work there, why you're a senior fellow, and what it means? Can you give the big picture before Professor Tootle goes into detail?
Yeah, no, that's there's a lot in there actually. But no, those are good questions. And the exact etymology of it, I'm not certain 26 years ago. But I think it was a nod towards saying, we live in we operate the Bill of Rights Institute, according to we teach teachers about American founding principles. We teach civics and history. That's our mission. I love our mission. And to say, we embrace the principles of a free society. Now, what you saw on our website is, I think, indicative of who we are. We believe in, a natural rights republic. We believe in what Lincoln called the apple of gold in the frame of silver. We believe that we have rights, whether they're written down in a Bill of Rights or whether they're natural rights. Um, and those rights are protected by the rule of law, right? They're protected by our picture of silver, which is the Constitution, and that provides the basis for self-government. And so, and everything else pretty much fits into that paradigm. We've been teaching that to teachers and students, tens and tens of thousands of them, hundreds of thousands, for several years, for 26 years, and I have been there for over 10 years. And why do I love working there? Well, I love doing the research and the writing, the editing, all the um, you know creation of content that goes out into the world, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on our website, essay form. I love working with great scholars like Stephen and Steve Knott and Josh Dunn and many others who have been on your show. And just participating in, you know, promoting in some humble degree to our national civics education is just really important to me. It's just defines who I am. I could be doing a lot of other things, teaching and so forth, but I've chosen to do this and really embrace the mission.
Have you won yet? Sorry, as a follow-up question. Is America constitutionally, civically aware, or do we have some work to still be done?
Well, fortunately, for my job anyway, at the very least, we still have work to do. I try not to be too cynical about kind of the state of civics and civics education because all the kind of polls and all the questionnaires show kind of troubling statistics and all that. But we're doing good work. And, we reach one teacher at a time, one student at a time, and we just direct the conversation towards more constitutionalism. We want students and teachers to look at primary sources. We want to turn down the heat in terms of our civil conversation. I think we're doing great work, and it's the numbers show we're getting out there, and there are a number of other good organizations doing similar good work. And I'm confident. I'm hopeful.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, Professor Tootle, the show is yours, and I'll interject as I always do when I wish to do so. But the show is yours, Professor.
Well, I guess it's hard when you know somebody because if I have a question for Tony, I usually just ask him. So I have to imagine what would other people want to know. So I'm going to ask a bunch of questions that I think I already know the answer to, but I think the rest of the world probably would want to know. And one of the things I love about the BRI is that you guys really put your money where your mouth is, and you actually created a textbook that could be adopted by high schools. And it was fantastic. It is fantastic. It's still there. I don't want to talk about it in the past tense. Do you ever feel like you're sort of caught between extremes because some school board would say, "Oh, we want this right-wing version," and then the other one says, "No, no, we want this left-wing version," or "We want to replace the right-wing version with the left-wing version," or vice versa. And then here you come with your perfectly reasonable textbook that doesn't, it just sort of it does a great job of assembling a bunch of people I think are really wonderful scholars and presenting this material in a way that's compelling and meaningful and useful and all that, but it doesn't necessarily serve the political interests of the right or the left. Do you ever feel like you're sort of you're not able to get traction because you're just trying to tell the story?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot to unpack, but yeah, I mean, do we feel that? Do I feel that? I mean, I feel that constantly in terms of how are we going to frame this? What's our wording here? How is it going to be interpreted? Is it going to be misinterpreted? That kind of thing. Having said that, we let kind of the two extremes just kind of do their thing, and we just try to create the best possible scholarly content for high school students and college students, middle school students that we can. Um, what the book you're alluding to is Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness, which is available free online. It's had millions of views, and it's being used by students and teachers all across the country. And we've had a great deal of praise for it. And just to give your viewers just a quick background, we invited over 100 different scholars to contribute to this because we wanted students to see, it's just not one omnipotent voice from the textbook, sort of this all-knowing, all-powerful voice going to tell you all the truth. We wanted to get a variety of perspectives, and we have some people who would be considered pretty conservative, and we have some people who are, um, editing some pretty hard left periodicals, and 100 scholars in between them. But we try to get the best people possible, and listen to a lot of voices. And there's a lot of primary sources. There's point counterpoint essays to show disagreement on a lot of different topics in U.S. history. And some really great, vibrant lessons in there for teachers to use in the classroom. And we just try to make it dynamic, vibrant, and as scholarly excellent as we can. And then, all the noise and all the chatter from the extremists, well, the proof is in the pudding. And we can see in our media hits too that, a lot of different groups from right to left and everywhere on the spectrum are quoting our and using our materials. So,
So a
you know,
follow-up question,
yeah.
Tony. I watched one of your videos on your website, and it was on Marbury versus Madison. I think it was only 4 or 5 minutes long, but it was actually a pretty good little. I studied in law school, which was kind of boring. You made it pretty good. I mean, I don't think you produced it, but your institute. It was a pretty good little summary of Marbury versus Madison. Do you find it frustrating though, in the era of tweets or whatever they are now, truth socials and tweets and South Park? How to gain people's soundbite attention. Is it hard? I mean, I know a lot of people read good history books now because of Professor Tootle making them, but I still think it's a tiny portion of society that pays attention to real politics and real history. So one more bite at that apple.
Yeah. So, Stephen has actually appeared on a show we used to do for our BRI YouTube channel called Close Reads, and we were looking at a document, a primary source from history, from civics, for 25, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And what we found is we had a good audience, but not an expansive one. And so we've reduced kind of some of the time, as you say, with attention spans and so forth. I've been doing some videos for America 250, short stories that I narrate these very dramatic mini documentaries for about 4 minutes. I've done one on D-Day and one on the battles of Lexington and Concord, one on Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. They're getting tens of thousands of views. And you're right. I mean, our homework help videos that you alluded to with Marbury versus Madison, I've actually helped write and been involved in scores of those over the years. And those have hundreds of thousands of views, on various topics. So, yeah, I mean, we're meeting the market where it is, and we're not compromising on the quality of what we're teaching, but we are looking constantly for new ways and new media to push it out there to the world. So,
Good, thanks, Professor Tootle.
Oh, I was just wondering, almost all of the programs we are both involved in are focused on teaching the teachers, getting into high school teachers. But I often wonder, are we really feeding the 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 people who create quality content? I was noticing the other day that only a handful of colleges still have, for instance, political historians. And we can't just rely, I mean, not to editorialize, but like we can't just rely on the Ivies and UCLA and two other schools to generate political historians, It is amazing how few schools teach political, diplomatic, and military history anymore, which is what most people think historians do, you know. But if you actually look at who the professors are, almost nobody does political, diplomatic, or military history anymore.
Right.
So I wonder if I mean, I understand it that BRI has to have a focus, but I wonder about the next challenge of what to do about the erosion of civic education among the professors,
Mm.
you know, the people who teach the teachers in college. And the if you can even, I don't even know if it's possible to have curriculum battles in higher
Mm.
ed because we have um, you know, different rules about academic freedom. You know, high school teachers don't have it. They, you know, they have to use approved curriculum. So any thoughts on any of those issues? I'll leave it open to you which way to take it.
Yeah, I mean, it's troubling, right? Because I'm constantly seeing scholarly friends, professor friends on social media talking about this program was canceled and that program was canceled. You know, a lot of history, a lot of political science. I have one friend who's just teaching way outside of the area of expertise because, you know, they've let almost the whole department go. You know, he is the department now at his smaller college. So it's troubling, you know. And yet there are some good signs, right? University of Tennessee, Ohio State, University of Texas. A lot of these places have recently started their civic centers, and so they're doing great work, and that's a very good thing. Is it, you know, I don't know if it's going to change the tide per se, but it can help. There is a movement in the right direction. Our bread and butter has always been middle and high school students. We've recently started, you know, K through 8, sort of little learners, if you will. So we're our space is really K through 12, and you know there isn't, you know, still thankfully, you know, U.S. history requirements in almost every state, and civics requirements and so forth, some kind of government class at some level, you know, middle, high school, younger grades. So, you know, at least for now, we do have an audience for our materials, and you know, we're constantly, you know, bumping up against, you know, how important is civics, and is it being taught, and STEM is obviously, you know, a lot of focus today in education. So. I believe in our mission. You know, I think sometimes it feels like we're, you know, sort of, what do you call that? You know, throwing the ocean back in or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Trying to
You
bail
know,
out the Titanic with a teaspoon, you know.
yeah. But you know, we're doing good work, and you know, we see the results in
Would it
our own.
shock you to know that my both my kids went to a school founded by my sister? You know, she was not the superintendent there anymore, but um, the old California curriculum used to be that in the third grade you would learn local history, and then in the fourth you would learn U.S., and then fifth is sort of world, and then back to U.S. again in the sixth, and then seventh and eighth grade, you would learn world history in the seventh, and then US again in the eighth. And my kids have had none of that,
Hmm.
just none. They have one class called humanities that is supposed to combine all humanities education, which means that they read a novel a year.
Hmm.
You know, and usually one young adult fiction novel a year will
Right.
never teach someone about natural rights.
Right.
It just
Right.
won't. And
It's very troubling, Stephen. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
uh,
it's state by state, you know, and you know, private schools have their own standards and so forth, but yeah, it's very troubling.
are you heartened though by the expansion of several of the last seminars on? I'll just be honest, I don't remember if they were BRE or BRI or not, where I was with teachers. I was really, I think it was a teaching American history seminar.
Okay.
And I was really struck by how happy the teachers were who were teaching at classical schools.
Hmm.
I hadn't anticipated that, but I was really impressed with the way they described um, the quality of their curriculum and how the kids were interacting with it. Have you noticed any uptick in the classical education schools around the world, around the country?
Yeah, no, we have, and we've been working with classical schools for in the decade I've been with BRI, and so we have a lot of good relationships with them. But we have a lot of good relationships with, parochial school teachers and public school teachers, and a lot of them face different challenges and so forth, and we really do love what's happening in the classical schools. They're very inclined to use, the primary sources and to teach great books and so forth, and provide a rigorous education. But we also know a number of our, public school teachers who are fighting the good fight and doing the best job they can, in inner city Chicago or wherever, where they're facing, sort of parents on one side and the legislature on the other side and the administration, and they're doing the best possible job they can, and offering those kids the same kind of primary sources and as rigorous an education as they can. So we certainly applaud. I'm very much personally a fan of what's going on in classical schools, as is BRI. But we try to reach, teachers in different settings.
And it really is kind of magical what happens when a student connects with a primary source document in a way that's unlike anything else. Because you mentioned the Apple of Gold document, and I was teaching it in one of my classes, and you could just see that, of course, 2/3 of the class is tuned out, or wishing they could be on their phones or whatever. But you can sometimes see like a third of the people are leaning in because they start to realize as you go through Lincoln's words, they start to realize at first, like, I don't think you can almost see it in their eyes. I don't think I need to know this, or why is this important? And then it goes to, oh, that's an interesting point that I never thought about. And then you see the transition if they get to that point where they say where they can come to like, oh, he's talking about me. that
Right, right.
that the reason I'm here is and that I'm willing to have hope about how I could have a better life is that I don't want a mere change of masters. I actually am willing to work and dream about a better life for myself. And if that's the core mission of the United States of America, maybe I need to think about America a little bit differently, you know. And it's amazing how that happens if you just go through the document line by line, and but you got to have a little buy-in from the other side. But um, there's nothing that works like that because they feel that direct connection to Lincoln. And,
Yeah,
oh, if I can understand Abraham Lincoln, then the whole world is open to me, you know.
yeah.
And I
And
tell
it's
them,
hard, right?
yeah, but there's no Harvard version of Abraham Lincoln. If you understand this, you understand it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I taught at Christopher Newport University last fall. You could tell some of the students hadn't really seen primary sources before, and they're kind of struggling. And it's like, wow, this Federalist paper is
Yeah.
pretty hard. These
Yeah.
anti-Federalists, like, I don't even know what I'm reading. Uh, and then you're trying to read through Tocqueville and all this stuff, and it's not easy, right? And I think as teachers, as professors, we need to acknowledge that. And we can sit here and belabor it and lament it all day long, and their reading levels and their background when they come to us. Fine, take them where they are, start them, walk them through that, walk them line through line, talk about what it means to be an American. These are sort of human questions, right? Or questions of what it means to be an American, and we can all relate to that. But you have to get that buy-in, but slowly walk them through that, and by the end of the semester, they're doing amazing things, right?
Yeah.
And just the discussion takes off by itself then. And it's great to see that, whether you're in middle school or high schools or fancy prep schools or you know inner city schools. It's beautiful to see the students gain that confidence and start to grapple with these fundamental questions of their own humanity and their own country and so forth. That's beautiful.
It's kind of the magic of it because they start to realize that it is a giant waste of time.
Yeah.
And I feel like BRI deserves some special credit for this because one of the things that you have really tried to do is put it together into a story so
Mhm.
that if you dive a little bit deeper, all the content is there and it's still accurate and still correct. But then if you start to take a little more of a, overview, you start to realize like, oh, this fits together. Uh, this actually works. And I was wondering if you felt like, and this is going to seem like a crazy question, because you are a historian, you are a storyteller.
Mhm.
And I've always wondered if you felt like the fact that you are a storyteller helps you run an organization like BRI because I mean, now I'm leading you to the answer I want you to have, but because that this is more effective when it's a narrative. Have you ever thought about that having that narrative structure actually helps with the organizational structure?
Yeah, I mean, we're conscious of it all the time. I mean, it's really who I am, right? It's whether I'm in the classroom, whether I'm writing books or essays, whether I'm producing content for BRI. I'm a storyteller. I love stories. I think it's what makes us human. And our president, David Bob, loves narrative, and he always is pushing me hard on that and encouraging, say, pull out the story. And he said something several years back, which I'll just never forget. He said, we want to appeal to the students' intellects, but we mostly want to appeal to their souls, right? To their hearts and their souls, and get them invested in this. And like I said, ask those fundamental questions about what it means to be human, what it means to be an American, because that'll bring the content to life. That creates a personal connection, right? And not just sort of, a sort of a race, class, and gender kind of identitarian kind of connection, but really a human connection that we can all, we can all connect with Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, right? We can all connect with Frederick Douglass's speeches or Lincoln's speeches and so forth. So we really try to draw out that narrative.
And you played an important role in one of my former students, the book you have on Washington and Hamilton, um, in part because it informed my own learning when that book's kind of, was it 10 years old now, maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 2015.
And so just in terms of shaping my thinking on Hamilton, you and Steve both influenced me greatly. And your little book on Hamilton, which is also great. I highly recommend he has a little biography of Hamilton that's fantastic because gets all the big ideas right, which is the important thing. And it's very readable. But I had a former student, and I remember the moment where he said he recognized that Alexander Hamilton was his ancestor. This is just somebody whose parents were immigrants from Mexico, but that's the powerful moment, right? That's what you're always hoping for as a teacher, where somebody says, I realize that Alexander Hamilton was my founding father, that he's my ancestor, because I get to pick them because we're an ideological nation state, and you're like,
Peter Schramm kind of philosophy, is that what you're talking to?
well, I was certainly also influenced by Peter Schramm. I don't know, Tony, if you ever had any interactions with him back in the day. I mean, it's Pete.
Man, I was at the very first teacher seminar back when like Bill Allen came and like taught down Washington, and there were like 15 teachers. Dude, I was there at the beginning when he
Wow.
started teaching American history, and like we got a free lunch. I was like, wow, free lunch. And I got like some free books. And I went up with a friend and we had breakfast on the way, traveled up together. It was so much fun. And then that turned into more Saturday sessions with Victor Davis Hanson and Ken Masugi,
Yeah.
uh, and some really great scholars. And then it turned into a week-long summer course, and then it turned into the master's program. So now oh yeah, no, I love Peter. Yeah,
Present at the creation. Wow, that's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah, and that was sort of my introduction too. I was a grad student and they had a conference and I drove up there and I realized I didn't know who I was at the table with, but it turned out that I was at the table. I was having lunch with Peter Schramm and Charles Kessler.
Oh wow.
And I was telling them all of my really important ideas about the Declaration,
Oh
and I
good.
had no idea who I was talking to. But of course, they both said, would you be interested in working for us or writing for us? I was just spouting off at lunch and but that was like his great genius was pulling people together in a positive way. So
But I, coming back to
yeah, yeah,
I think you're right though. I think that someone like your student, it's like, you know what? It's like, hey, I like self-government more than autocracy.
yeah.
I like opportunity more than aristocracy, right? I like personal freedoms. I like being able to have free speech. I like my freedoms. I like a constitutional rule of law where you go to court and it's not just judges being bribed and so forth. I like that the rule of law applies to everyone equally. I mean, an imperfect nation, but an aspirational nation, an ideological nation, as you say. What does it mean to be an American? Well, you hold these set of ideals. You don't need to be a certain race or a certain religion or anything. You just have to embrace its ideals and that
And
apple of gold.
that and the phrase liberty to all, giving students to understand, and we'll bring it back to the Bill of Rights context, that that no, I have to not just want rights for people who I like or for people who
Mhm.
are like me, but it's liberty to all that clears the path for all. Why is it that you want it's because especially when I'm teaching mostly immigrants or the children of immigrants,
Mhm.
they understand like all I want is a fair shot. you know uh because and I always use the analogy of like if you're a fan of a sports team, why you should still want referees in a rule book, because
Right.
then you'll know that if you won, you really won. And getting people to understand that it's liberty to all, not just liberty for people who I like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. These apply to all, and I have to say, it just reminds me of the fact that when I came out to the Sequoias and did that lecture, and then I came to your class and so forth and talked to the students. I think I've told you this. I was just so touched the entire time I was there because I was like, wow. I mean, I can talk about these ideals in the abstract. I can tell you great stories from our history. I can talk about constitutionalism all day long. But these students were so impressive because they were living it.
Yeah.
Right. They were there. They were enjoying their freedom. They wanted opportunity. They wanted equal opportunity. You can see their parents working hard to give their kids a chance and so forth. And our, the educational system out there really provided that hand up, and to the extent they were taken advantage of. I mean, it was very touching, as an American to see that in action.
Well, other than the fact that it's my hometown, which people sometimes accept as a reason why I teach here, people do sometimes ask, why do you teach at a community college in the middle of nowhere, And I think that you got to see why. You know, I mean, I've enjoyed every other job I've had. I generally, I'm not a bummer. I like being wherever I am. But uh, um, but that sort of sense of mission is
Mhm.
something I have particularly enjoyed in my time coming back to my hometown to teach. I mean, I used to say the student when I taught at OU every now and then, the student I resented the most was like the bored second son of a Cleveland dentist. The second for some reason it was the bored second son of a Cleveland dentist was the one who was the most frustrating.
Yeah.
But I don't get a lot of that where I am now, you know.
Not that sense of entitlement, that's for sure.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, I guess occasionally you'll get an athlete or something, but no, that's definitely never the vibe in my classes. So you started teaching, and I haven't talked to you that much about what it's like. Have you gained any? I mean, well, how has that changed you? I mean, had you taught before? Had you ever been in a classroom like handing out grades before?
Yeah, I mean, I've taught for 15 years. I mean,
Oh, okay.
I taught high school for a number of years before coming to
Oh,
BRI
right.
and had taken some time off to write some of my books. But yeah, no, I mean, and then I came back to teach that course in the fall and hope to do more teaching at CNU. Um, it was great. I mean, there were challenges, like always. How invested are the students? How much do they care about, me talking about the Constitution and so forth. Um, but it was a very, very rewarding class, and a lot of students responded well, and by the end of the semester, we're doing some really spectacular things. There were some really talented young people, but you're facing new challenges, right? I mean, the phone is just a constant distraction, right? And the computers and social media and all that. Um, the AI is just a morass that no one can successfully navigate.
Yeah.
But I'll also say this is that, I found which is something very interesting in having teaching a course on the Constitution and trying to make it relevant, trying to bring in some current events, and obviously the election was last fall and so forth. The very troubling thing that bothered me a lot, and my wife had to get a lot of earfuls about this, and some of my, colleagues over at CNU, was that I don't. I think the students have opinions. They're just really, really scared to share them, whether they're on the right or the left or somewhere in the middle and so forth. And it was like pulling teeth. I opened it up to talk about the election. I threw them some bones, some prompts, and so forth. Not one student wanted to bite. They just didn't want to touch because they're so afraid of putting their opinion out there. They're self-censoring. They're afraid of being doxxed or whatever, or canceled, and whatever the latest phrase is. And they just there's such a sort of sense of conformity,
Yes.
and so forth, and an unwillingness to sort of engage in the public square and try to have some kind of civil conversation to try to forge some kind of consensus. Uh, that I found troubling.
Yeah, I actually had a disturbing conversation with a former student last week where I was asking her, well, my class, and I was trying to say, oh, my class wasn't that scary and stuff. And she said something like, yeah, I tell people just sit there and keep your mouth shut. And I was like, you tell people to sit there and keep their mouth shut about my class? Like, that's the opposite of what I would want you to say about my class. And she's a very quiet person, but I was shocked that that would be the advice, and and I wished I could have a longer conversation with her about that, because I do feel the same way that um, and it might be, I don't know. This could end up as a therapy session between the two of us, but like, um, I started to wonder, is it because what I'm teaching them is so different from what they're getting in their other classes that like maybe they perceive me as being some sort of wild-eyed radical or something? I don't know. Put me.
I don't know. I mean, I think you see it in the larger culture. To say like, oh, just for an example, oh, Trump won. Like we didn't know all these people wanted to vote for him because
Yeah.
they're afraid to say it on social media, right? They don't talk about it, right? And just that. I don't want to necessarily dig into that per se, but just that kind of phenomenon that I think sometimes people on the right or left feel emboldened, but I think a lot of us do sort of self-censor ourselves for sort of popularity or not to have that unpopular opinion.
So, just to turn the conversation back to the positive here for a second. Now, I'm going to remove the apple of gold. Here, these are the documents I'm going to remove from your choices.
Okay.
Uh, Not the Declaration, not the Federalist, not the Constitution. Take out apple of gold. Take out second inaugural Gettysburg Address. I'm also going to remove from the table Coolidge on the 4th of July and Reagan's farewell address. With those off the table, tell me a document that you're excited to teach.
Many come to mind. On the Declaration, I'm gonna have to go with Frederick Douglass. What is the Fourth of July to the slave? Where
Excellent.
he sort of rails against the inequality in society, rails against slavery, and says this is your Fourth of July. This is your celebration. This is not mine. And yet, in the end, also says, as he turns the tables on his audience, that the principles in this document are saving principles, right? And says, that is sort of aspirationally what we want.
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful document. If you gave me a second one, I would probably choose, Madison's on property, where he says we not only have, uh, a right to property, to physical property and wealth and homes and that kind of thing, but we have a property in our rights,
So I don't know. My favorite historian wrote an excellent article on Madison and property, uh, explaining that, and you should absolutely use that wonderful article by me on that on that essay. Because hey, I
You still
obviously
agree with
that
yourself?
yeah, I still would agree with myself on Madison and property. And I was gonna say, I have I do two other Frederick Douglass documents. Well, I do one because the second one's not ready yet, but I don't know if you've ever read it. I mean, not to, I haven't read every single speech of Frederick Douglass, but um, his last statement before he died, that last speech that he gave, I'd never read it before, and right
Hmm.
now I'm like kind of preparing to trying to figure out how to put it in to my classes because it really is amazing because he has this this is the last thing he said before he died, this sort of
Mhm.
last full statement, and he talks about how we shouldn't want to become race men.
Right.
And I'd never seen that, and I always pair. What I'm thinking about doing. Just run this past you, like you're my teaching coach or something. Is that what is this Fourth of July to the slave? But then I forget what it's from, but I use it. It's he has this section in one of his speeches where he talks about the national ship, where he says,
Right.
uh,
The
you know.
ring bolt.
Right, exactly. So I usually start with that one, then go, what is a slave to the 4th of July? But now I'm thinking like that farewell speech. Well, he didn't know it was a farewell speech, but that last speech of his is just this tremendous bookend because he was such an interesting thinker. We sometimes like freeze him in amber at one point in his life rather
Sure.
than seeing how his constitutional theory developed, because what he was advocating early in his career was very different from early middle to later, at every stage he never stopped evolving his thinking, and it makes him far more interesting than somebody who like boring like me who always just agrees with himself, at all ages. Douglas, he was way more interesting. Um, anyway, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think a shift on the Constitution is just really dramatic, right? Going from
Right.
this the Garrisonian pro-slavery Constitution to that of uh, more of a Lincolnian anti-slavery Constitution, and some scholars recently have done that
Yeah.
too. Some historians today, and they've taken a fresh look at evidence, and I had greatly admire their humility to
Yeah.
sort of go before the public and say, well, my views have changed a little bit, they've evolved, and here's the evidence, right? You look at the evidence of the pro-slavery and our slavery constitution.
And I mean, it seems like what we do is so contrary to what people want us to do. Because what people want from us is they want some sort of weapon to beat up somebody, who they don't like. And I have to constantly tell my students, like, yes, even though everybody in the world is telling you that what you should do with the past is figure out who you hate, then go investigate that, find some weapons, and then beat up people with it. But
Yeah,
what you're going to miss is you're going to miss the real Frederick Douglass, and you're doing the thing to Frederick Douglass where you're turning him into something less than human. You're
sure.
robbing him of his humanity, you know?
Right, of his agency. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, and BRI is big on that. I know I'm big on that. I totally agree with you that we want to tell the story in all its complexity, right? We don't want to weaponize the past or constitutionalism. We don't want to paper it over. We don't want to cherry pick anything. We want to face it in all of its stark reality, because if we're going to ask questions like what does it mean to be an American, we need a rich answer and in the end, and a rich conversation and looking at all of the evidence. I totally agree.
Well,
So
I've been ignoring the chat too, so I guess I just opened up the chat and realized people have been asking questions, and I
that in
first,
a second, Professor.
oh yeah,
Uh,
go for it.
I have a specific follow-up on the 4th of July, Frederick Douglass.
Yeah,
When I read that a few years ago, and I think because of you, Professor Tootle, I was pretty surprised by it because it gave me a different view than I ever thought of. I'm one of those, Boy Scout, Army, patriotic, raise my hand, America first, hooray. I love being an American, period. And it gave me a totally different viewpoint. Well, yeah, but I'm not black and I'm not the descendant of slaves. And oh, maybe the 4th of July doesn't mean as the same thing that I've always viewed it to be. And so I
Mhm.
found it to be really opening, a really aha moment. So my question to you both is in a backhanded way to our current president. He is raising so many constitutional issues. Like every day he throws out something that I have to kind of not look back to law school. I have to look back to, I don't know, my whole world view of, well, can you really take away birthright citizenship? Or can you force private institutions to your will, or can we have the government buy thing, and be involved in company? I just on and on and on. And in a way, this would be a great time for every American to become an amateur historian and to start reading because there's just so many issues out there to think through. Can you give a gut reaction to that? Because I'm having this, and maybe it's just because of my age. I'm 59, and maybe I have a little more time to do some reading. But it seems like there's a yearning to understand versus the soundbite, aha, gotcha thing. And how do we foster that among the American civic, among the public? Appreciate your response.
defer to you for the guest honors.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's been a troubling trend over the last several administrations that, executive branches is whether it's on immigration policy, going back to Obama, or student loans and other various issues.
And you mean
Uh,
unconstitutional action by the president?
yeah, yeah, tariffs, all of that. Now these are by and large valid. An executive order is in and of itself a valid thing for a president to do, but one of the biggest things that I'm troubled by is how much Congress is deferring on these issues. These are issues that should be decided by Congress. Constitutionally, they're in the powers of Article 1, Section 8. Secondly, we want these not to be the decision, the will of one person, whether it's Trump or Obama. See, the big problem we have today also, there's a lot of things coming out of my mouth. If our guy does it, it's okay, right? But if the other guy does it, it's a threat to democracy. It's unconstitutional. I would say that we need to take a more expansive view, sort of put party aside, put our culture war aside, our apocalyptic view of politics, and say, think about it constitutionally. Well, which branch of government should be doing this? The deliberative branch, the branch that forges consensus, the one that understands compromise, or should it be the will of one person? Well, it should be a congressional responsibility. Having said that, Congress doesn't want to touch it, right? Because Congress is becoming extremely performative. It's becoming about image and monetizing the image of each individual member. And they don't want to touch these divisive issues, right? They just want to attack the other side for having different views. And so they sit back, they defer to the president. They just let the courts decide whether an executive order is constitutional or not. And Congress isn't willing to do the hard work on immigration, on tariffs, on just sort of look at all of our contentious issues today. Congress doesn't want to touch them. Why not? Because, well, they might be voted out of office, or they might, lose half their social media, audience, or what have you. So they have to take very hard lines, but not touch issues. And now the president is essentially exercising power in the way that we don't really want him to. Precedent has been set for several administrations, and we ascribe the president way too much responsibility, right? Gas prices, eggs, hurricanes, earthquakes, everything, right? Traffic, whatever the problem is, the president's ultimately responsible, right?
Entertainment.
Unfortunately, that's becoming sort of the case. That's how much power the president is sort of getting over all these issues that should be dealt with by other levels of government, other branches of the government. I'll let Stephen have a word
Well,
here,
I was
but
just going to say, just to draw it back, that's like the BRI mission is to remind people that Congress deliberating is a feature, not a bug.
Mhm.
That's not a failure of Congress, and it's not that when Congress is deliberating or not acting, that doesn't mean that the other branches get to step in. Uh, and I would just also say, because part of John's question was about the study of history.
Yeah.
And I would say, because and how his eyes were opened by this Frederick Douglass document. And I would just say, like, don't let that be the end of it, though. Frederick Douglass had a beautiful mind, and as I said, every time I dip my toe back into those waters, you will be richly rewarded. And there are certain people who, the more you read, the more you like them, and there are certain people, for me, the more you read, the more you dislike them. Yeah, the more I read Woodrow Wilson, the more I hate him. But I,
John Calhoun for me.
yeah, Calhoun, exactly. You're like, I can't believe this diseased mind that I'm reading. Like, this is so horrible. Yeah, perfect. Yes, Calhoun and Wilson, perfect examples of this. But there are these other people who, the more that you study them, the more you start to appreciate the contours and the journey. And um, uh, James Weldon Johnson is one that I always throw out there as a curveball, because
Mm.
once you start dipping into, for instance, his political writings, you find, oh, there's so much more there than I ever anticipated. But on a purely, that's on a nice theoretical level, but I agree with everything that you just said. I think I've mentioned almost everything you just said in previous shows. I mean, there's a reason why we're friends. But uh, it's not just because you agree with me. It's because I agree with you. Uh, Sorry, that's a little point of personal privilege. Sorry,
Go ahead,
John.
either to the comments now, or we can open up to our two lawyers to
Oh,
see.
I was just going to say, somebody asked an easy question that I can answer. They asked, what is a classical school? So classical schools are schools that are designed usually K-8, but there are also classical high schools. Actually, maybe more high schools now than anything. I don't know. But they are schools that follow a classical education. So you read Plato and Socrates and Western Civ and Milton, and they have an entire curriculum that is based on classical learning rather than modern learning. And so you learn modern things via this vehicle of classical learning. And it's turned out to be just an extraordinary model. I remember there was one in Colorado called the Ridgeview Classical School, and it just consistently had the highest test scores in the state, just year after year after year. And it's because they never taught to a test. It's funny, you take a school that rejects the very idea of state testing, that consistently scored the highest on state testing. And it turns out that if you say, well, we've been accumulating this knowledge for about 6,000 years, what's the most important stuff? It turns out to be pretty good. Human beings are pretty good at narrowing down curriculum if you give them 6,000 years to do it.
So, Professor Tootle, would it surprise you that UNC, Northern Colorado and Greeley, where you also taught, where I was a student, would it surprise you that most of my philosophy and political science courses studied original texts from Plato and Plutarch and Aristotle and I mean, I had one class where we had like 14 little books. We had to buy them all and read from those. There wasn't a textbook. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me that that happened then. It would shock me if it happened now, because I can almost guarantee you that it doesn't happen now.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What's your next? Have another one, Professor?
Well, I wanted to open it up because we're already at 9 o'clock, so I wanted to see if anybody from the panel had questions for Tony. Yeah.
Bart or Jeff?
Bart had to step out.
Oh, Bart's gone. Jeff, anything from you today?
Does that mean I get Bart's question too, in addition to mine?
Yeah.
So yeah, I have one question just based on what we were just talking about, and then another more philosophical question. So the discussion about the abdication of power by our legislative branch has concerned me greatly. And I thought it was interesting, the characterization that, you know, each of them are now just trying to maintain a personal brand. I hadn't really thought of it that way. I always think of it that, you know, they're always campaigning for their next reelection, but really you're right. I mean, MTG and AOC, I mean, they're all creating brands for themselves, and it's not necessarily just so they get reelected the next cycle. So I guess my question is, what's the path back? What's the path back to a functioning checks and balances, three co-equal branches of government? We can come back to the Supreme Court later, but let's talk about the legislative branch. How do we get them to do their jobs?
Well, it's a hard question, right? Because if we look at the stream of American history, we've always had tension between the branches, but we've had the branches struggling to be dominant, right? And so you had an ascendant Congress, you had the imperial presidency, you had judicial supremacy. Each, you know, the branches were contending for power, not surrendering it. So it's a pretty unprecedented situation as far as I know. What's going to have to happen is that, well, I mean, in the end, Congress is going to have to take back its prerogatives. And it's going to have to make some hard decisions. And this is going to take courage, right? It's going to take political courage. It's going to take personal courage to at least institutionally say, this is where the laws are made, right? This is where self-government happens. This is where deliberation happens. This, you know, we should not be subject to the will of one person. I mean, in the end, regardless of right or left of who's president, that is dictatorship, right? That is tyranny when just one person decides his or her will. You know, I think it's going to take and also a reorientation of thinking for Americans, right? And this is where, you know, BRI is fighting the good fight every day in terms of teaching constitutionalism, and Stephen at Sequoias and all of us that, you know, the people have to stop assigning responsibility for everything that's going on in America to the president, right? They have to think more constitutionally. They have to think like, oh, I would rather have my state legislature think about this. I'd rather have my town council thinking about this than just someone on the national level, right? Someone on the local level should be dealing with this. So I think it's got to be a reorientation of thinking, you know, who Americans look to sort of quote unquote solve their problems or at least just engage in self-government. Because the system is really out of whack now. And Congress has to find their kahunas and like take back, you know, their prerogatives. And if they don't, then I don't know what the way back is, because if we're just going to have presidential government, that's not really our system, and it's going to lead to a lot of troubling things, and it probably already has over the last 10 or 15 years. And so I don't want to say we're going to be lost, and I don't think it's too late to come back from it, but Congress is going to have to take back its authority. It's constituted, you know, prerogatives under the Constitution, right? It's constitutional authority. You know, it has that lawmaking authority, but for too long now, it's deferring to the president, and they're not going to be able to come back to it if they keep it up.
So
Do you
Tony,
think that they're
Go ahead.
deferring because the president is the leader of the party in charge? Because they no longer think of themselves as Congress people. They think of themselves as what their party is, and they vote with their party.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, some political scientists say that actually parties are really pretty weak, and even parties within Congress have become weaker and weaker and weaker. And it's really, I would argue that it's a little bit more ideological, right? And also a little bit more personal, as I said, in terms of the performative aspect of politics today. Um, so. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I agree that it's totally just a matter of party. I think it's a more of a broader sort of trend to see politics as a zero-sum game. When I win, you lose. And when if you win, then I lose and vice versa. And it's become this sort of apocalyptic vision of politics. And the other side is always the existential threat to
Mhm.
democracy. And so what's happening, I think, is that is when their guy is in, right, and the president comes in office, gets a majority in Congress. The idea is to ram everything down the other side's throat as soon as possible while they have power, and pretty much reverse everything that was just transpiring 6 months ago with the previous administration. And then when the other guys come to office, they do the same thing. And it's just this whiplash effect. I think that's very troubling for the rule of law. I think it's very troubling for popular self-deliberative government. And because we don't know what the laws are, right? And they're always changing. And, if you concede anything, if you compromise on anything, it's not only a compromise of principle, as we used to say, it's a threat to democracy and it's the end of the world, basically. And I think that that's really kind of what is at the heart of politics today, guiding kind of some of these issues of the separation of powers, but also just in general, like our general political dysfunction, and not only our unwillingness to talk to each other, but to see sort of it's not just a matter of extremes now. It's a matter of how much they're infecting our politics with this vision they have that the world is going to end if the other guy gets into power. And in a certain sense, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because that's almost what's happening, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Is that each side sort of almost does become that existential threat to democracy because they're just running everything through the executive branch. They're not governing through Congress, and they're ramming things down our throats we don't necessarily want. And so we're switching parties every 2 years, every 4 years now. It's just, there's sort of no stability in politics or in the
Which
parties now.
which is what the court is for, but I'll save that question to see if there's time at the end.
Okay, let me ask a follow up to that. You may not like this answer, and if you don't, I semi agree with you. Or the question, I semi agree with you. We have homogenized fundraising over the last couple decades, where Congress people used to raise money from their district in small donations at the neighbor's house or the PTO or and some rich people and labor unions, etc. But now almost all of it is big money and they contribute to 200 Congress people. And you need to make sure you have that access to that bundler, and whoever has power goes to that bundler, and all of a sudden you have a couple extra $1 million because you're towing the party line. I think at some point we're going to have to do some version of a constitutional amendment changing Citizens United. Now, you may not like that answer, but there's got to be some way to put people back in power over their Congress people rather than just one big national body. Reaction to
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Well, Citizens United sort of aside, I think what you're saying is a lot of validity. I think that you're right that representatives used to have that connection to the people, to their constituencies, and raise some money for them. And campaigns were probably relatively expensive for the time, but they're not the kind of spending we have today. And I think what you're also saying is it's shifted away from representative government, from constituencies, to representing an ideological position. And it's that also damages parties too, right? Because it's not sort of, you're raising money from the local, Republican or Democrat party, whatever. But now you're going to these ideological sources to wage your apocalyptic war on the other side. And that's what I think is very troubling, because then we continue to feed this ideological warfare that we're engaged in, rather than the hard work of self-government.
Love that. Professor
John,
Tootle, you
John, I
want to
have a
add out?
question. John
Yeah,
has a question.
I guess I have one observation is, and maybe prediction is that the AI is going to democratize fundraising, but compliance is still elite. That with the existing tools, anybody can afford to fundraise now, and I don't think. I don't, it might not even be baked into this next election cycle or the one after it, but I don't think people really
It's
I'm
good to
sure it's happening as we speak.
Yeah.
People are realizing how these tools can be manipulated for fundraising, and will be. But the what I mean by compliance is still elite is it's right now it still requires a certain amount of money to afford the inevitable lawsuits that you will encounter once you enter into public life. So, but I did have a question for Tony because the I've been thinking a lot about my friend Hiram Lewis and his brother Verlin wrote that book Myth of Left and Right, and I read this book called The Tangled Tree, and it was about how a bad metaphor led to a lot of bad public policy with regards to evolution. Just people believing that evolution worked like a tree, and then they tried to put that into public policy, and it's like that's not even how evolution works, you know. But I've been thinking about this because we keep using this word ideological, and I use it too. But every now and then, I think I need to stop myself and say, I don't know if there's actually an ideology that's tied to this, because it seems more like that old Bugs Bunny cartoon where Daffy Duck and Elmer Fudd were there, or it was Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd, and he would say it's Wabbit season. No, it was Daffy Duck and Elmer Fudd because he'd say, well, it's Wabbit season. No, it's duck season. You know, I don't know because if it was ideological, then we would say low taxes or low tariffs, you know, but it doesn't seem to matter. You know, if one side says it's wabbit season, the other side just says it's duck season. And there doesn't seem to be any ideology tied to it. Anyway, those are just my first thoughts.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I totally agree in the sense that I think the left and the right do have some issues that they are generally going to align with. But I also think you're right in the sense that they're also really opposed to what the other side is doing. And that's sort of becoming the dominant strain in rather than formulating like Reagan did, like a positive, like amiable view, like this is what we believe in. This is what
Yeah, this is
conservatives
what we're
believe in.
for. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what we're for. And you can agree with us or disagree with us, but this is what we're for. And we think it's, good for the common good. And so when we come to power, we're going to deliberate and try to pass laws, and we're going to try to institute these policies, understanding that we're going to have to like compromise and all of that. Today, our politics is very different than that, right? It's wow, the other side is endangering, existentially democracy itself, and with climate change, the world, and it's really gonna literally lead to the Trump or Biden or whatever is literally gonna lead to the end of the world. And so I think you're right, and it used to be that we have majority minority and we'd have that loyal opposition and they would at least talk to each other and they had their disagreements because, as you're saying, they had their programs, or platforms, I should say, that they would generally support their viewpoints. And you knew what the Democrats and Republicans stood for. And the minority, the numerical minority might disagree, and you'd have to compromise and deliberate. But now it's just there's no, I wouldn't say a loyal opposition. There's more just we need to stop whatever the other side is doing. So now it's
So Tony,
And I was
Tony,
thinking about go ahead, John.
all right, thanks, Professor. Tony, you're not old enough for this, but I used to watch All in the Family,
oh, I
and
know.
you are not old enough.
I'm 55. Yeah, I'm old.
And when Meathead arguing with Archie and poor Edith, and sometimes Gloria, but they just like hated each other, and we all would watch that. My dad would support Archie, and he'd get mad at Meathead, but no one knew that because it was just in the privacy of our own home. But
Yeah.
now it seems like we all know each other's stuff. And in contrary to high school and college students that try to hold their tongue, there are a ton of our friends that don't hold their tongue at all. They get on there and rant on Facebook all the time about who they hate and why. And most of us are wise enough to not engage the real hotheads. But my question to you I am surprised about how deep it is in our society about just thinking one president's fascist and the other's a communist. And it seems like they kind of mean it in the population. And I am wondering whether they truly mean it and they're leading Congress, or Congress or president has set it up. Who's really, I guess, the tail wagging the dog thing? Who's in charge? What does the Bill of Rights Institute think about our organizational structure as a people? Who's in charge?
Right. I think that, these various echo chambers that are set up, I think that whether in social media or, the culling and cultivation of who you follow and how you're influenced by certain media, social media, et cetera, I think is very real. And so, excuse me, what BRI is promoting, what I constantly hammer away at, even among my own kids, sort of when they get hot under the collar, even around the dinner table, is to say, okay, take a breath, calm down. We need to talk. We need to actually listen to each other, right? We can have a deliberation, and we can even debate, and we can even do so pretty hotly, at times. But I think the bigger problem in our society today is that we're not talking to each other. We're not sitting down over that proverbial beer or a cup of coffee and just, BSing about politics, and yeah, you're just saying that because you're a liberal, but you laugh a little bit and you move on, and you've quote unquote solved all the world's problems, but you're just still friends, right? And now whoever's elected, if there's an election and the president changes, now families are being split up, right? And on the other side, either the parents or the kid or vice versa, no one wants to come to Thanksgiving, and they're there just to blow things up. I mean, my God, like it's not that important. This is what I think is related to that apocalyptic understanding of politics. Like, I'm even willing to destroy my family or my relationship with my parents or with my kids or with my siblings because I think they voted for the other guy. I mean, do you know how warped that is? Do you know how troubling that is for American democracy? I mean, that's bad, right? I mean, I think we're taking ourselves too seriously. But again, I think we're so fearful that the other side is going to destroy things that we're willing to sacrifice even our relationship with our families, with our friends, and defriending people on Facebook and all of that. It's not good.
Professor Tootle, do you have an add-on?
Oh, just that I agree. It's I've thought so many times about some of my friends who support Trump or vote, or there's a difference also between people who actively support Trump and or voted for him, for whatever reason. I've had a lot of friends, or a Harris for that matter. And I remember something that Steve Hayward said, early on in the Trump years, like first term, Steve Hayward said, some of my friends support Trump, some of my friends don't. I'm going to stick with my friends. And I've sort of taken that right up until the point where somebody takes a leap off the deep end. Because I have had some friends who really went to dark places with their support and descended in,
Or opposition, right?
yeah, or opposition, but going into conspiratorial, alcoholic, and firearm related places where at that point I I cut him off, and said, "Hey, if you ever dig yourself out of this hole, I'll still be here waiting for you, but I can't be a part of your drug fueled uh, firearm outrage.
But and I would go even further. It's like it's so fatiguing, right? Seeing this on social media, listening to enough friends, like, and it's not just politics, right? It's the kind of car you drive. It's whether or not you go shopping at Target, or whether you're boycotting, or whether you actually drink Starbucks, God forbid. Whether it's like, can't we just get back to the social media of 2007 where I'm seeing pictures of your dinner or something?
Yeah, your cats.
My God, like your cat. Show me more pet pictures. I mean, it's just, I mean, I don't want to live in a world of unicorns and rainbows, but I mean, my God, it's just so fatiguing, right? Oh my gosh, I can't believe you ate that brand of donut. You must be some one of those right wingers or left wingers. It's just like the burritos. I mean, it's everything, right? I
Do
think
you ever
about the
get accused?
outrage just this week, like jeans outrage and Cracker Barrel outrage, and I just NFL cheerleader outrage. I'm just, what are we going to boycott in the next 6 hours? I'm just so tired of it, right?
I don't even know about it. I find it strange when you deal with people. I don't know if this ever happens to you, but where I'm accused of having secret beliefs and
Oh yeah,
about
all the
things,
time.
and then they go a step further and they're talking about some whatever the hot boycott of the moment is, and I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm just like, what am I supposed to? And they're talking to each other with using these like code words, and I'm just sort of like, I don't know what any of this is about. Having friends impose secret beliefs on you is something that happened to me a lot this past summer with like friends' wives saying, "Oh, don't get him started on this." And I'm like,
Right.
I've never said a word about this.
I'm just
What
here
do
for
you
a nice
think
glass
is
of
gonna,
wine.
yeah,
What are
like
you talking about?
what do you think is gonna come out of my mouth? Like I have no idea, but you have obviously got a lot wrapped up in what you think my political beliefs are. And John, it happened to us a little bit on Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just overly sensitive to it, but does this ever happen to you, Tony, where
Oh, all the time, and especially at BRI too, bro. People think we have various agendas. I'm like, well, just, can you just read our curricula and then you decide? Because we've got like Maurice Isserman writing for us, but we've got Stephen Hayward writing for it. Like, I just like, I don't know where the bias is. I mean, we have primary sources and they're comprehensive. And Jim Oakes, was served as the editor for this curriculum,
oh, you
and
mean the
he's really
neo
good and he's really
America
reasonable.
triumphalist James Oakes? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just, we're just using the best scholars. Just read the resources, and like I say, I don't do politics online and on social media and all that. And I'm like, look. Only a few good friends like my wife, my kid, like know my political views. I'm not out there, and it's like don't assume all these things about me. But I will sit down and have a bourbon with you, and if you want to talk politics for a little bit reasonably, sure, let's be friends and do that. But you know, people do make a lot of assumptions.
And do
Absolutely.
you ever, and this is the other thing, like sometimes like among friends, I'm often the stuff I'm saying is a trial balloon. You know, I'm saying,
Yeah.
isn't it possible that, or, give me your best argument against this, or like, but
Bad. Yeah.
yeah, I'll state it, but it's not because, and I hope, maybe a little bit following the example of some of my favorite thinkers. Um, you know, as soon as I'm encounter new facts, I just change my mind.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I didn't know that. Now, no,
Persuade me because I
yeah,
want to have I'm a truth pursuer,
yeah.
and I want to hear evidence and I want to hear all the evidence and all the facts and change my mind, please.
Yeah, I wasn't born advocating nuclear power, but somebody convinced me because they had a lot of really good facts, and so what I'm waiting for is for somebody to come up and show me some new ones, and then I'll stop advocating for nuclear power. But like, I don't know, right now, nobody's convinced me otherwise. I
So,
mean,
gentlemen,
yeah,
I
sorry.
need to interrupt us again because we have less than 5 minutes.
Oh,
I have one last question, but I want to make sure that either Tony or Sandon or Jeff had another question on the Supreme Court. Lightning round. Any last calls that we need to to really try to get answered. Tony.
Yeah, I think it's more, as always, it's more a comment than a question. So first off, thank you, Tony. I love your name. You seem like a great guy. I love that name, Tony. You know, we share it. So, and we talked about it before. So what I think is going on, social media is adrenaline at the nth degree. That's really what social media is about. And I think when we're in our adrenaline minds, we actually aren't thinking rationally. So it's hard to have a discussion when you're in adrenaline mind. You know, like John, you may have some training because of your army stuff that you're capable of like monitoring your adrenaline, but most people don't know. They're junkies for it, you know. And and the other thing that's happening is social media has allowed us to depersonalize each other.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking to a human. I'm not saying, John, you're a piece of crap. I'm saying that to that, you know, icon or whatever. So depersonalization is a huge issue in what we're doing right now. I think it's driving, and what we need to do, what we're doing to break it down, is seeing each other for human beings again, you know, and saying, oh, this is Stephen Tootle that I'm talking to, the human being, not Professor Tootle, you know.
Yeah.
And Stephen
And Tony, you
Tootle.
got to keep moving, but thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Tony Williams, any reaction to that?
No, and then that's absolutely true. It's way harder to rant and rail with all your vitriol against someone when you're just having a meal and maybe a drink, and you're less likely to just completely go off the deep end in terms of calling them an idiot and whatever else. I'll
But
say,
it
I
happens
see my wife has
often,
joined. We need to get her a question.
Oh man.
I think time zone might be wrong though. You want to go to Lynn?
Yeah, let's see if his
Shoot,
wife.
hit me with your questions.
You got to come
Lynn,
off mute, Lynn.
I'm so
and
sorry.
we're finishing, Lynn, but you get a bite at the apple right when we're ending.
Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Sorry to join so late. This is myself and my brother are sitting here in Cincinnati. Anyway, I don't even know what your topic of conversation is. So my apologies.
It'll be on YouTube and Spotify within an hour or two.
Yeah.
Honey, everything I've said for the last hour and a half, you've heard it a million times at the dinner table, so we're all good.
Thanks for signing in.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sandin, anything?
Just real quick things. First, thanks as a layman. And the other, like the thing that's hurting my stomach right now is your discussion about the student, the female student it happened to be that was afraid of talking. I had various thoughts on that, but our inability to talk to each other really hurts, really frightens me.
Yeah, we got to fix that. I agree. Jeff, do you need to ask your question or do you want to on the Supreme Court, or are you going to skip it?
Hey, John, I think it's worth noting that Tony's wife and brother are sitting at a table sharing a meal, because that's what we need to do more of.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. Jeff, are you skipping? Are you okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
I can't hear you. I think you said okay. All right. So my last question, and then I need a reminder, Professor Tootle, you have a question of our speakers as a new trend over the 2025 thing. But my last question, Tony, is there a favorite Bill of Rights? I mean, a lot of my conservative friends go Second Amendment, but I mean, is there one we should be, you know, particularly in love with, or particularly attuned to on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis? Is there something that stands out to you that you'd like us to pay more attention to out of the first 10 amendments to our Constitution?
Yeah, well, here's an interesting answer. You know, Alexander Hamilton says in Federalist 84, he said he actually argued against the Bill of Rights, and I'm not, you know, I'm not doing that working for the Bill of Rights Institute. It may be ironic, but you know, he said the Constitution itself is a Bill of Rights. So if we can think more constitutionally, if we can get back to a greater rule of law, if we can get back to the idea of limited government within the boundaries of the Constitution, I think that that's the best way, actually, that we can protect our rights. You know, all of the rights in the Bill of Rights, but also the rights that are not contained in the Bill of Rights. So maybe that's sort of a somewhat unique answer. But yeah, no, I might agree with Hamilton on that. The Constitution itself is a Bill of Rights.
Professor, I haven't never thought about it in that way. I've always said it's the 10th Amendment, though. If it's not in the Constitution, it's reserved to the states or the people. And that's not the same. We don't care about it. It's just another layer of government should be worried about it, or the people should be. Is that a similar answer to yours?
It's yeah, I think that that's true, and the Ninth Amendment covers our rights too, in sort of a natural law, natural rights kind of way as well, right? We have rights that are not in the Bill of Rights, and that's kind of what I was alluding to as well. Ninth, Tenth Amendment, great ones. Yep.
Lovely. Professor Tootle, do you remember your question of our speakers, guests?
No, I forgot. What was I saying?
I do. It is going to be impossible with Tony to do this because I've read some of his recent Facebook posts. Your
Okay.
question of our speakers, this is a new question that you decided to start adding, and is what's your favorite recent book, or what's a book you'd recommend to us? And it's
Oh gosh.
too many
Okay.
books.
You're asking the wrong guy. He's got a stack like this tile.
Yeah, that's true. I really, out of all the books I've read this year, and I've read a lot, I'm at 70 already. I would say that James Oakes' book Freedom National, because I'm doing a lot of work on slavery for BRI and in some of my own research and writing. Freedom National, if anybody wants to understand slavery and its role, its contradiction within the American constitutional order, a natural rights republic, and so forth, get Freedom National. It's a really well written book that really explores this central paradox of America and really gets a lot of things right. I know I learned a lot.
But
Reading.
Tony, you haven't read that before this year?
I can show you the 2,000 to 2,500
Read
books on
60
my
books.
shelf that I haven't read yet.
Well, but the only reason I say that is I'm just so pleased with myself
Yeah.
because Professor Tootle made me read that book 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It is a superb book. But
People derive a little too much pleasure from reading a book before I do. Not the first time. This is the first time. I admit it. I admit it. It's a fabulous book. I had read a lot of other Oakes's other books, but that I think was earlier this year. It's a really good book.
it's really good.
And
Professor
you know
Tootle,
that
finish us
I'll
off
just
with
say there's a great companion that I haven't read until this year because he's not a historian, so I kind of overlooked his book. But I don't know if you've read Akil Amar's The Words That Made Us.
Oh,
I I feel like that as a companion piece to Freedom National is they're really spectacular to because as I'm not finished with it yet, but it's pretty big, but it's a fast read for being
yeah.
as big as it is. But I keep pulling out my Freedom National
Mhm.
as I'm going through the words that made us, and of course, feverishly rewriting my lectures all the
A
time.
lot of conservatives were surprised by that book because, like, he's been a little bit more on the liberal side of jurisprudence, in terms of his constitutional law books, and he's a very prolific, great guy. I've met him a couple times. Um, but that book, that like they wanted to poke holes in it and they couldn't. It's a really good book.
Well, I think if I would obviously I don't review books that came out 3 years ago, but if I were to write a review for that book, it would be something like Akil Amar thinks that he's written a book about liberalism, but he really wrote a book about conservatism.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I don't think he realized. I don't know from listening to interviews. Like, it is, or I shouldn't even. Maybe I shouldn't say conservatism or liberalism. People might get the wrong idea, but just the idea that you shouldn't be afraid to explore the ideals of the founders. Everybody's like afraid, they think, oh, what am I going to find? And you know what you're going to find? You're going to find a lot of really good ideas. And maybe, yeah, there's going to be some stuff in there that is distasteful. But the more you study and you put it into context, the more you realize how spectacular it is. Don't be afraid to read Alexander Hamilton. It's always great.
In 10 seconds, I'd just like to add, I mean, you just start, I mean, it's really, it bothers me a lot that whether I'm with BRI, whether I'm doing my own stuff, people assume that the founding is that's a conservative thing, right? And I'm like, no, we're all Americans. This is an American thing. This is for everyone. This is for liberals, conservatives, everyone in between. These ideals, the ideals of self-government, of liberty, of equality, that's all of us. This is the great conversation that we should be engaged in. And so I appreciate the hour and a half that we got to talk about it.
Lovely. Is that your concluding comment, Tony?
I think I can let that be my concluding comment, except for how much I appreciate you having me on, and Stephen, man, all the love from earlier, right back at you.
Yeah.
You honor us with your presence. Last word, Professor Tootle.
Oh, just more praise for a guy like Tony Williams. We were talking about the bad part of social media, but the great part of social media is that every day it makes me happy to think about Tony Williams out there doing his thing in that way that only he does it. So not all social media makes you sad. Because reminds me of my good friend who's out there on the East Coast, and he's doing all the things that remind me of who he is as a person. And I love seeing it. And I do miss you in person, though. We got to get together. Yeah, a low tear goes down the cheek. But
my wife was talking about a California trip, so
I know. Well, the room's always waiting.
All right.
Gentlemen, thank you. Well done. Appreciate your time. Hopefully lots of people will see this in coming months. Have a great day, you all.
Thanks, John.
See ya. Thanks again.